Welcome back for another deep dive.
Always fun.
This time we're tackling a classic,
Uh,
The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
mm-hmm.
We got a bunch of excerpts from you guys, and it seems like you're really looking to really get to the heart of these habits and how to actually put them into practice.
Yeah, make them actionable.
Right.
Yeah,
No more just reading and nodding along. It's time to actually apply this stuff.
totally.
So one thing that really jumped out at me right away in Covey's work is this idea of paradigm shifts. He's basically saying the way we see the world impacts everything we do.
Yeah, totally shapes everything.
And he uses that optical illusion, right? With the old woman and the young woman. Have you seen that
Oh,
one?
yeah, I know that one. Absolutely.
It's like two people can look at the exact same thing but see something completely different.
Totally different interpretations, just based on their existing paradigms.
And that's what's so tricky, right?
Hmm.
We're often not even aware of the paradigms we're operating from.
Yeah, exactly. Covey really contrasts this with what he calls the character ethic. It's about like building a foundation based on principles.
Oh, usually.
And he contrasts that with the personality ethic, which is more about surface level techniques.
So it's less about trying to like manipulate a situation and more about aligning yourself with principles that kind of naturally guide your actions.
Yeah, aligning with those deeper principles for sure.
That makes me think of that story Covey tells about the ship captain avoiding a collision.
Oh, yeah.
And he used that to illustrate that there are like these principles that govern human effectiveness. And when we align with them, things just work better.
Yeah, you get better outcomes. And it's fascinating because these aren't like just some made up rules, right? These principles, you find them in philosophies and cultures all over the world.
Yeah, it's like a universal thing.
Right, speaks to their universality.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just some random self-help fad.
Definitely.
And what's really cool is that Covey doesn't just talk about this stuff. He actually lives it. He shares stories from his own life about how he applies these principles, even in parenting, which I think is so interesting.
Oh, yeah, it gets really practical.
Like that example with his daughter and the toy. Remember that one?
Yeah.
And instead of just like, being the dad and forcing her to share, he uses it as an opportunity to teach her about the intrinsic value of sharing. It's about modeling the behavior, right?
It's about, yeah, modeling the behavior rather than forcing compliance. It's like fostering that deeper understanding.
So would you say that this emphasis on self-mastery is really the foundation of the 7 habits?
Absolutely. The first three habits, he calls them private victories, are all about mastering yourself before you can effectively interact with others.
Okay, so for our listeners who might not be as familiar with the book, could you give us a quick rundown of those first 3 habits?
Sure. So the first one is be proactive.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that you have the power to choose your response to any situation.
Okay.
And you focus on what you can control, what he calls your circle of influence, rather than getting bogged down by things outside of it.
So it's more about taking ownership rather than playing the victim.
Exactly. Instead of, why is this happening to me? It's, what can I do about this?
Right, right.
Then you've got habit two, begin with the end in mind. And this is where you define like your personal mission, your values, your goals, and use that as a compass for your decisions.
Okay, so it's like having a roadmap so you don't get lost in the day-to-day stuff.
Precisely, making sure you're moving in the right direction.
Makes sense.
And then there's habit three, put first things first.
Yeah.
And this one's all about prioritization, right? We tend to get caught up in what's urgent, but this habit encourages us to focus on what's truly important, even if it's not screaming for our attention right now.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Our inboxes and our to-do list are full of things that feel urgent, but are they really moving us toward those bigger goals we just talked about?
That's the question, right? It's about recognizing that those important but not urgent activities are usually the ones that have the biggest impact in the long run.
So it seems like mastering these first 3 habits is really about like building a solid sense of independence,
Yeah, you could say that.
becoming truly self-reliant.
It is. It's a prerequisite for moving on to the next set of habits, which are all about interdependence,
Okay.
building those effective relationships with others.
Those are the public victories. Habits 4, 5, and 6.
That's right.
And we'll dive into those after a quick break.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've talked about those private victories, those habits that help us become more self-aware and independent.
Right, that foundation.
But now let's shift gears and talk about the public victories, the habits that are all about building those strong relationships with other people. So where do we even begin with that?
Well, Habit 4, think win-win, is a great place to start.
Okay.
It's really about like shifting our mindset from competition to cooperation.
Oh, interesting.
Instead of seeing every interaction as like a zero-sum game
Right.
where, someone has to lose for the other person to win,
Right.
we try to find those solutions where everybody benefits.
And I see how that ties into what we were just talking about.
Yeah,
If you're coming from a place of self-mastery, you're less likely to feel threatened by other people's success.
exactly.
You're more open to collaborating and creating something that works for everyone.
It's not just about like warm, fuzzy feelings either.
Oh,
It's actually more strategic in the long run.
interesting.
When people feel like their needs are met, they're more likely to be, you know, engaged and committed.
Makes sense.
So think about like a workplace, right?
Hmm.
Where everyone's constantly trying to like outshine each other
Oh, yeah?
versus one where people genuinely support each other's success.
Yeah, I'd much rather work in the second one.
For sure.
But I gotta admit, I struggle with this one sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
What happens when you're dealing with someone who's just not interested in a win-win?
Yeah.
Someone who's determined to get their way,
Yeah.
even if it means you lose out.
That's a great question.
What do you do then?
And that's where the next habit 5 comes in.
Okay.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
This one is all about the power of empathetic listening.
Okay.
Putting aside your own assumptions, judgments,
Right.
and really trying to see the world from the other person's perspective.
Okay. I can see how that would be helpful in, like, dealing with a difficult person.
Right.
But isn't that, like, a little idealistic? In the real world, people don't always have the best intentions.
You're right. Not everyone's coming to the table with, purely good intentions. But
Yeah.
even then, like, even if their intentions aren't great, truly understanding their perspective, their motivations, what they're afraid of, it can give you some really valuable insights into, how to handle the situation.
So instead of immediately jumping into, like, defensive mode, you're trying to figure out where they're coming from.
Exactly.
Yeah, that could definitely de-escalate things and maybe even open up a path to finding some common ground.
Exactly. And remember, even if you ultimately can't reach a win-win,
Right.
having that deeper understanding can help you, like, set boundaries
Oh,
and protect your own interests more effectively.
so you're not just being a pushover, you're being strategic.
Right. It's about being strategic and informed.
I'm starting to see how these habits really, like, build on each other.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have a win-win if you don't even understand the other person's needs.
Right.
And you can't effectively seek to understand if you're not coming from that place of self-awareness and proactivity.
That's it.
It's all connected.
It is.
And this brings us to habit 6, synergize, which, takes this whole idea of interdependence even further.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that when people with different perspectives come together and really listen to each other,
Mm.
they can actually create solutions that are way more innovative and effective
Right.
than anything they could have come up with on their own.
It's that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts idea.
It is where, the combined effort creates something totally new and unexpected.
It's not about compromising where everyone just gives up a little bit of what they want.
Right.
It's about finding that third alternative, a solution that like transcends the individual perspectives and meets everyone's needs in a way that wasn't even on the table before.
Okay, I love that concept, but
Yeah.
it sounds a bit magical.
I know.
Like, how do you actually do that? How do you create this synergy in real life?
Well, it starts with those habits we've already talked about.
Okay.
You need that foundation of self-mastery, empathetic listening.
Right.
But then it's about creating an environment where people actually feel safe to share their ideas, even if they're a little unconventional.
Okay.
It's about embracing that creative tension
Interesting.
and being open to challenging, the way things have always been done.
So it's not just about having different perspectives in the room.
Right.
It's about having the right kind of interaction
Yes.
where people feel heard and respected, even when they disagree.
And this is where leadership is really crucial.
Oh, okay.
A leader who really embodies these principles, they can create that culture of synergy where
Yeah.
innovation and collaboration can thrive.
That makes a lot of sense. You could have the most talented team in the world, but if they're all just battling egos and competing for resources,
Mm-hmm.
they're never going to reach their full potential.
Exactly. It's about fostering an environment where people feel empowered to contribute their best.
Right.
And where collaboration is seen as the key to achieving those amazing results.
So this is all really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how does this all tie in to that final habit, sharpen the saw? We've
Mm.
talked about personal mastery
Mm.
and building those strong
Yeah.
relationships. But where does self-renewal fit into all of this? Okay, so we've covered so much ground.
Yeah.
We've talked about being proactive, setting goals,
Yeah.
understanding others, creating synergy.
All those good things.
But now let's talk about that final habit.
Right.
Sharpen the saw.
Yeah.
It's all about self-renewal, right?
Yeah, it is.
Sustainability. Why is that so important in this whole framework?
Well, think about it like this.
Yeah.
You're working really hard to saw down a tree,
Mhm.
but the saw's getting dull.
Okay.
You're going to keep pushing through, exhaust yourself
Right.
with a tool that's not really working anymore.
I mean, probably, yeah.
Or would you take a few minutes, sharpen the saw, so you can actually work more efficiently?
I know what I should do, but
Yeah.
yeah, most of us, we just keep pushing, right?
So easy to do.
We get so caught up in those urgent tasks
Mhm.
that we forget about the things that would actually make us more effective in the long run.
Exactly. Covey calls that being penny wise and pound foolish.
Love that.
He's saying that this habit, sharpen the saw, it's about investing in yourself,
Okay.
in your physical, spiritual, mental, social, emotional well-being.
Wow, it's a lot.
It's recognizing that you're your most valuable asset,
Mm-hmm.
and that taking care of yourself is essential for sustained effectiveness.
So it's not selfish to prioritize self-care.
Not at all.
It's actually like a strategic move.
Absolutely. Think of it as preventative maintenance.
Okay.
Like, you wouldn't run your car without ever changing the oil.
Right.
You need to invest in your own well-being
Hmm.
to prevent burnout, maintain your energy and focus.
Okay, I'm sold. So what are some practical ways we can sharpen the saw?
Well, let's start with the physical dimension.
All right.
The basics are always a good place to start.
Okay.
Getting enough sleep,
Mm-hmm.
eating healthy food, exercising, managing stress.
Yeah, these seem obvious, but
Okay.
they're often the first to go when we're feeling overwhelmed.
They are. We think we can just power through,
Right.
but our bodies, they catch up to us eventually.
Yeah.
We get sick, we get injured, we burn out,
Exactly.
and then we're forced to deal with these health issues
Right.
that could have been prevented with a little self-care.
So investing in those physical sharpen the saw activities
Mm-hmm.
actually helps us be more proactive
Exactly.
in other areas of our
It
life.
all comes back around.
Yeah. Okay, what about spiritual renewal? What does that look like?
This one's about connecting with your core values.
Okay.
Finding those sources of inspiration and meaning outside of yourself. It doesn't have to be religious.
Right.
But it can be. It could be spending time in nature, meditating, practicing gratitude, listening to inspiring music, volunteering.
It's about feeding your soul, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's different for everyone, too.
It is.
What works for one person might not do anything for another.
It's about experimenting and finding what works for you.
Right. All right, and then there's mental renewal.
Yeah.
How do we keep our minds sharp and engaged?
Well, Covey talks about lifelong learning,
Mm-hmm.
reading, taking courses, having those thought-provoking conversations,
Right.
exploring new ideas, new perspectives.
I love that.
It's about staying curious
Yeah.
and challenging yourself intellectually.
It's so easy to get stuck in a rut,
It really is.
especially as we get older.
But that sense of curiosity,
Right.
that eagerness to learn new things, that's what keeps us, vibrant,
Yeah.
engaged with life.
Yeah, it's like a muscle.
It is.
If you don't use it, you lose it.
Use it or lose it.
So important to keep challenging ourselves, keep expanding our knowledge.
For sure.
Okay, and then finally we have social emotional renewal.
Right.
What's that about?
This is about nurturing your relationships,
Okay.
investing in those emotional bank accounts we talked about.
Right.
It's practicing empathy, being kind and compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
setting healthy boundaries,
Right.
creating a supportive network of people around you.
I think this one is especially important today,
Oh, yeah.
where, we're constantly bombarded with information and it's easy to feel disconnected from each other.
Absolutely. And it's not just about, like, spending time with people.
Right.
It's about the quality of those interactions.
Oh, okay.
It's about creating those genuine connections,
Yeah.
being present with each other, offering support and encouragement.
I'm noticing a theme here.
Oh, yeah.
All these sharpen the saw activities, they require us to be intentional,
They do.
to really make conscious choices about about how we spend our time and energy.
You got it. It's
Right.
about recognizing that self-renewal isn't a luxury.
Right.
It's an essential part of living a truly fulfilling and effective life.
And taking ownership of our own well-being.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been incredibly insightful.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the 7 habits,
Hmm.
do you have any final thoughts for our listener?
Well, I think the main thing is to remember that the 7 habits aren't like a magic formula.
Right.
It's a framework, right?
Yeah.
For living a more intentional and effective life.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, aligning your actions with your values and
Yeah.
continuously striving to become the best version of yourself.
It's not about perfection.
It's not.
It's about progress.
It is.
Yeah.
It's about taking those small steps every day
Yeah,
to move yourself in the right direction.
I love that. Well said.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits.
Mm-hmm.
Hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
I did.
And remember, the power to choose your response,
Yeah.
to be proactive, it lies within all of us.
That's right. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
And on that note, we'll sign off for today.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening.